Thank you. Just to clarify at the start of my speech, we are also okay with not putting statues of Aristotle or Plato in Tiananmen Square. What I want to do today is not add so much constructively. I don't usually anyways. What I want to do is I want to talk about what's gone on in the round so far. And I want to talk about my personal experience in China a little bit, and why I think, for me, as someone who's just a visitor here, what Tiananmen Square meant for me and seeing the Chinese people there, and why I think adding a statue of Confucius would necessarily change that very special place for the worse. But first, I want to talk about what Jess said. So first he said, we'll forget our history. We would like to point out again that this statue does exist in a museum, blocks away from the heart of Tiananmen Square. So unless you also bulldoze the museum, and I guess kill all the people who've ever learned anything about Confucius, I don't think you're going to forget your history. What this round is about is not whether people should ever learn about Confucius. It's about whether the Chinese government should be kind of endorsing his philosophies by putting that individual in Tiananmen Square. Their argument to this is, well, we need to depoliticize this space. We would point out that adding another controversial person to an already controversial place, I don't like this.
Adding another controversial person to an already controversial place doesn't make that place less controversial. If we added a statue of Robert E. Lee to the National Monument right next to Lincoln, yes, Southerners would be very happy about that. But we don't think it makes people who are upset with Lincoln more comfortable. We just think it makes more people uncomfortable. We think adding a statue of Confucius in this situation doesn't make the fact that Mao is already there any less political. It makes the fact that Confucius is there more political. So if you actually want to depoliticize the square, you don't do anything in this situation. We would also say... No. We would also say that just because Confucius wasn't a politician doesn't mean that his views aren't political, highly controversial, and alienate lots of people. When I went to Tiananmen Square last week, I wasn't impressed by the dominance of Mao. I was impressed by the dominance of the Chinese people who had gathered there to celebrate their nation, their history, their culture. If having a statue of Confucius makes one Chinese person less likely to go to the People's Hall, less likely to go to the Forbidden City, less likely to go to the center of Beijing, the heart of China, I am not okay with putting that statue up. Because Tiananmen Square represents what the Chinese people have fused together. Not just the Han Chinese, but the 28 major ethnic minorities in China. If one weaker woman feels less likely to go to that square, I'm not okay with putting that statue up, because China is supposed to be for all of China, and not just for those who ascribe to Confucius beliefs. Go ahead.
So if you concede that the Tiananmen Square should be for all the people of China, why shouldn't it also represent the two most important political ideologies in China? The ideology represented by the controversial Mao, and the ideology represented by the as controversial Confucius.
Oh my God! Okay, were you not listening? Just adding another controversial figure doesn't make people more comfortable going there, right? So if I'm a woman and one of the 118 men to 100 women, I don't know what the stat is. If I'm a woman in China and I know that I'm supposed to be deferential all the time, or if I'm a child in China and I know I'm supposed to be deferential all the time, and I don't ascribe to these beliefs, I feel less likely to go and visit the heart of my country. We're not okay with that. We think you want to include as many people as possible in Tiananmen Square instead of excluding. No. Adding that statue doesn't make people more likely to go. No, not this time. So, they also said that this wasn't like Jesus on the National Mall. Well, actually, we think it is like putting a statue of Jesus on the National Mall. Okay, so Christianity, like Confucianism, we're not saying Confucianism is religion. We are saying, okay, I don't have to take you all the time, guys. It's not a rule of debate. Okay, Confucianism and Christianity are both philosophies. Christianity is a philosophy that informs a lot of the United States political culture. But it could make Muslims and Buddhists and Jews feel really awkward about going on the National Mall, and we're not okay with that, ladies and gentlemen. So They also said, we like the nuclear family. We also like the nuclear family. You don't have to have a statue of Confucius to teach Confucianism to people, but you don't have to enshrine the idea that you have to be subservient on Tiananmen Square, particularly when it's particularly controversial. So, go ahead.
Okay, so the statue on Tiananmen Square means that people aren't welcome to Tiananmen Square. Does the statue in the National Museum mean that people aren't welcome to the National Museum?
Okay. That actually speaks to a good point. Here's what I'm going to say. When something's in a museum, it tends to speak to the past. When something's on Tiananmen Square, we think it sends, the government sends a message that it speaks to. What does it mean to be Chinese? We think what it means to be Chinese, and I think we're clearly equipped to tell you what that is. Is that a country that is increasingly moving towards civic nationalism as opposed to ethnic nationalism. So what message does the government send when they put a statue of Confucius on Tiananmen Square? They say to the 27 other ethnic minorities in China that we like this guy who basically, well, I'm approximating, that we basically think that this guy who believed in the ethnic superiority of the Han Chinese is important enough to modern China to put in the heart of Beijing, to put in the heart of China. We think China is increasingly conciliatory, particularly towards its outside regions. We think in this situation, you're not going to make people really believe that you are one China if you start to re-emphasize the idea of the ethnic supremacy of the Han Chinese. We would say that China is a nation increasingly looking forward, increasingly looking towards the future. At the end of this debate, if you think Confucianism is your future, then maybe you should have the government put that statue there. But we don't think Confucianism as a government message is the future. We think that increased conciliatory policies towards everyone in China, to make everyone feel welcome, is going to be what the Chinese government ought to do. Putting this statue in the middle of Tiananmen Square does not make people feel more welcome. It means you're endorsing a particular view that alienates people for all these reasons we oppose.